So, a warm welcome to everybody joining us for the third event of this year's webinar series on the overarching topic of tourism and human rights. And this time we want to talk about the connection of thoughts between the Sustainable Development Goals and human rights, and the link with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. My name is Katharina Stechl, Program Manager of the Roundtable Human Rights and Tourism, and I am delighted to be your host for today's webinar. I also would like to introduce my colleague Yara Schreiber, who will work in the background to ensure a hopefully flawless technical procedure and will also be responsible for your questions. We have actually planned a few more webinars this year. And in addition, the Roundtable also has its annual symposium in September. And according to data protection, we won't be able to inform you. So if you're interested in the next webinars of the series and also about our symposium in September, please make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. We will now post the link within the chat. You can also just insert your email address if you prefer that. And so make sure to never miss a Roundtable event. Also check out our website, and we would be delighted and highly appreciate if you would take the time after the webinar to evaluate today's session. That always helps us to make processes better and to act according to your interests. We will also post that link within the chat now. So in today's world, where not only the tourism industry, but all of us as individuals are confronted with immense global challenges like the health and the economic crisis, and also a constantly changing climate, the role of businesses is more than ever crucial to tackle and address these complex of problems. And we know that especially for small and medium-sized tour operators or companies, that might be challenging. And that's why we're here today. And we are actually honored and affirmed that so many people are listening to us today. That shows that even in difficult times, human rights have to be a topic. And I'm also honored to introduce our high-profile speakers today, Mairead and Mia, who will share their expertise and first-hand experiences with us. For those of you who are not familiar yet with the Roundtable, let me take a moment to slightly introduce ourselves. The Roundtable is a multi-stakeholder initiative with currently 33 members from 6 countries, founded in 2012 as a nonprofit organization, and is the largest sector dialogue on human rights and tourism. Our membership is actually open to all different kinds of companies. We have travel associations, NGOs, multipliers, universities, and certifiers along with us. And we truly see ourselves as an open dialogue platform for the exchange of knowledge and know-how and mutual learning within the industry. And we provide information, guiding materials, examples of good practice. And as a trustworthy network, the Roundtable aims to support the industry in a very demand-oriented way, and to make sure that the resumption of travel is positive and sustainable for all stakeholders. Let me quickly go through the agenda and the housekeeping rules of today's webinar. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will soon be available on our website. All of you are muted by default, so please use the chat to ask your questions. We will have short time after every presentation to answer your questions. And then let me again introduce our speakers. We have Mairead here with us. She's an advisor at Shift, and works hand in hand with companies and other strategic partners to build capacity, to identify, prioritize, and mitigate human rights risks. She's working as an advisor at SHIFT, the leading center of expertise on the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And we'll talk about the SDGs and the UNGPs. And then we have Mia Klatte with us. She's normally based in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam and is as a sustainable and responsible tourism specialist, working in Southeast Asia since 2013 and works for Kiri Travel, a destination management company that works in various Asian countries. All right, so without any further ado, I will clear the stage for Mairead. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Katharina, and good morning to everyone. I'm going to first share my my screen, bring up some slides, and hopefully everyone will be able to see. And I have to say that all I can see at the moment are my slides. So Katharina, if there's any reason to stop me or to flag anything, please just let me know.
I will.
So thank you very much. It's indeed an honor to be able to speak with all of you and to share some thoughts and some reflections and to speak a little bit about the global standard on responsible business, which is the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, and then talk about how we see the interconnection and the overlap with the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'll begin with just introducing SHIFT. Many of you may not be familiar with the organization at all, but we're a mission-driven center of expertise, and we're all about the implementation of the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. Businesses obviously have a very large role to play in this implementation, but then so do government entities, so do institutional investors, so do civil society organizations. So there are many different actors that have a role to play, and we work across all of them, helping them understand how best to bring the UN guiding principles to light. So I'll start with this. Oftentimes people say, we're not terribly certain what you mean by human rights. And when you speak to people, there are different interpretations and different understandings. So at a very basic level, human rights, the idea behind human rights is very simple and it's very powerful. It is that every person around the world, irrespective of nationality, irrespective of gender, irrespective of race, irrespective of color, irrespective of religion, has the right to enjoy a basic set of rights simply because they have been born. These are rights that governments are not free to give or to take away, unlike other legal rights that they may confer on their citizens. These are rights that we all share, we should all enjoy. And you can see some of them here: the right to life, the right to participate in public life, the right to education, the right to work, the right to freedom of movement, and so on, the right to health, the right to privacy. These have been laid down, actually first introduced in 1948 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the aftermath of the Second World War and all of the horrors that went with it, and have since been laid down in the International Bill of Human Rights, various treaties, various conventions, and so on. And when people look at these, they often, particularly businesses, they often wonder what human rights have to do with them. But in actual fact, from research that we've conducted ourselves, but others have, we can see that businesses, through their own operations and their value chain, can impact negatively, but also positively on many, very many of these human rights. And it's because of this impact that for many, many years, there has been a lot of discussion at an international level, typically at the UN, between civil society organizations and between government and actors and between businesses to try and figure out a way to ensure that businesses where they had negative impacts on people were accountable for those negative impacts. And through that process then, in 2011, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights were introduced to reflect that, the responsibility and the roles. So they contain 31 principles across 3 different pillars, which you can see on the right-hand side. The first one is that the state has a duty to protect human rights. And they do that through legislation, regulations, and through holding businesses accountable where negative impacts occur. The second pillar then is about the corporate responsibility to respect human rights. And then the third pillar is that anyone who has been harmed as a result of business activity should be able to get access to effective remedy. The important thing to say here is that these 3 pillars exist independently of each other. And this is very important when businesses find themselves in countries that don't have very strong rules of law. The point is that businesses are still expected to live up to their responsibility to respect human rights. So moving on, what we want to do is hone in on that second pillar. And I want to talk you through the sort of the contours of what that really means. So first of all, businesses are expected to prevent harms to people, negative impacts on people, but knowing that life is life, knowing that new products emerge, knowing that political situations change in countries, etc. Impacts will happen. Therefore, businesses are also expected to address the impacts that occur. So it's not just a situation of do no harm, it's ideally do no harm, but when harm occurs, make sure you take steps to effectively address them. This is expected, this responsibility is expected to occur in your own operations, but then also in your business relationships. So we're talking about your supply chain, we're also talking about downstream. Therefore, we refer to this as your value chain. So businesses are expected to take these steps in their own operations and their value chain. And then there are 3 key elements that are very important and very specific to the UN Guiding Principles. So the first one is that through all of this, businesses are expected to put a focus on risks to people, not to think about risks to business. And this is a little bit counterintuitive because through your risk management process and risk identification process, you would naturally think about all of those potential risks to your business, to your bottom line, to potentially your share price, etc. You know, if you're a listed company. But what the UN Guiding Principles ask businesses to do is to turn that around and to look across their value chain and identify the places where their operations, where their business activities could impact negatively on people, and to hone in on those potential negative impacts on people. The guiding principles also ask businesses to go beyond compliance. In other words, it's not enough to say that you are operating within the legal requirements or the legal boundaries of a particular country. Businesses are always expected to live up to the international standard. And then the third piece is, contrary to a lot of what you read about when people talk about corporate social responsibility, when it comes to business and human rights, we're not talking about positive contributions that businesses can make. We're really talking about the ways that business can potentially impact negatively on people. Therefore, you can't offset harm to people on one side by doing something good on the other, you know, by building a clinic or by contributing through philanthropy to educational outcomes. You must first focus in on the potential negative impacts. And then afterwards, you can choose to use your philanthropic funding to make the positive contributions. So they're the key parameters that came with the UN Guiding Principles. And then specifically for businesses, what does it ask businesses to do? First of all, businesses are expected to develop a policy commitment to respect human rights and then embed it through their organization. Secondly, they're expected to put in place a human rights due diligence process. And you can see the graphic here takes you through a couple of steps. The first one is assessing the most severe negative impacts to people. We talk about salient human rights impacts. Then secondly, once you've identified what those most severe or salient impacts are, take steps to prevent those risks occurring or to mitigate them once they occur. So take steps using your leverage and working with potentially other entities. Then you track the effectiveness of the work that you've put in place, and then you communicate it to a range of stakeholders, internal to your organization, but then also external, and all the while engaging with directly affected people. When we talk about stakeholders in business and human rights, we're really honing in on the people who may be negatively impacted. And they really have a role to play through all stages of this due diligence process. And then the third expectation of businesses is putting in place grievance mechanisms through which people can flag that they have been harmed potentially by your business. And then once you're aware of harmful activity, then providing remedy. So they are the essential go-dos. Now, what I also wanted to talk about was the UN Guiding Principles and the relationship with the SDGs. So the Guiding Principles were universally endorsed in 2011 by the Human Rights Council at the UN. And then in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals emerged. And what you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here is the 17 goals. And you'll know that they split out into people dimension and planetary dimension. And I've highlighted the people dimensions. So for example, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and so on. But some research by the Danish Institute of Human Rights suggests that 90% of the 169 targets that sit underneath these 17 goals actually have some connection to people. So human rights are really threaded throughout the Sustainable Development Goals, even though very often when you speak to businesses and to commentators, they tend to think about the Sustainable Development Goals as very much planetary focused. So just to make sure that the connections are very clear and very definitely threaded throughout the SDGs. But we wanted also to talk about our reflections when we've seen a lot of activity, particularly through human rights disclosure or through CSR disclosure by businesses since 2015. And that is that in general, we see great activity by businesses in understanding what they need to do when it comes to the planetary side of the Sustainable Development Goals. And they typically realize that they need to tackle the negative impacts to the planet in order to make a very positive contribution to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce pollution, reduce deforestation, various things like that. So it's very much tackling the negative impacts in order to begin making positive contributions. And then, of course, on top of that, looking for ways through green investments, green innovation, and so on, to add in positive impacts on top of what they've already done to reduce the negative impacts. But unfortunately, when it comes to the people side of the SDGs, we tend to find that businesses jump automatically to the positive impacts. They're already thinking about the ways that they can focus in on positive impacts through philanthropy, through social innovation type activities through the companies and so on. And that's all really positive and extremely important and welcome, but businesses tend to fail to see that the negative impacts, by tackling the negative impacts, they could already be helping to support positive impacts when it comes to people. So they tend to look on the negative impacts as doing no harm and as compliance. And that's what we have been really observing over the last number of years since 2015. And it's very, very obvious when we're reading sustainability reports from companies. And what we're saying is that we really see tackling the negative impacts on people as the single most innovative and the strongest contribution that businesses can make when it comes to meeting the people's side of the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, you're reducing the harms to people, therefore you're bringing about positive outcomes for people, which then support the positive impacts that the SDGs are asking you to realize. And what I'd like to do is just show you this through an example of the living wage. So living wage, for those of you that may not be terribly familiar with the term, is about providing people with sufficient wage that enables them and their families, them and their dependents, to be able to meet all of their costs, all of their needs, and still have some money left over for a rainy day fund. There are particular methodologies that are consistently being used by different businesses and different organizations to calculate the living wage. But for the purposes of this, what I want to do is really just everybody think about this from the perspective of covering basic costs and having a little bit of funding left over to meet a rainy day or to meet an emergency. That's what we really mean when we're talking about living wage. And obviously it will change country by country. But the absence of a living wage typically sees the absence of certain other rights. So freedom of association, the right to collective bargaining, and non-discrimination. In other words, when people don't have enough money to meet their basic subsistence needs, plus some money left over, they're typically working in conditions where they don't have a voice. And we're usually talking about people who are already highly vulnerable, often women, often migrant workers, and there is no opportunity for them to meet some of their basic labor rights needs. But we do see that when businesses start off down the journey of trying to provide workers with a living wage, then positive impacts start to occur. We start to see that they're able to afford food. We see a reduction in child labor. Children typically are in a position to attend school. They have enhanced health outcomes. People receiving living wages often don't have to work as many hours. Again, that has positive benefits for their right to family life and also their health. And typically with living wages, people are able to afford adequate housing. So these are all of the positive impacts that occur when workers receive a living wage that covers their basic costs and gives them a little bit more for emergencies. And then I'm going to layer on here the places where we see the SDGs. So zero hunger, decent work and economic growth, no poverty, good health and well-being, etc. So this example really shows that tackling something tackling a human rights issue like a living wage and the related human rights that go with it, then can also begin to provide very positive outcomes for people that in so doing also tackle sustainable development goals. Thus, as I said earlier, we see respect for human rights as the single greatest way companies can contribute to the socially sustainable development. So what does that mean for businesses very practically, and how can you get started as you think about it? The first one, going back to the go-dos for businesses, policy commitment to respect human rights. First question really is, does your company already have some sort of public-facing commitment to respect human rights? If not, does it make sense to update an existing public policy statement, perhaps a public code of conduct, to include the human rights, and then to ensure that what you say about human rights aligns with the expectations of the UN guiding principles? Second step then, the second go-do for businesses, the human rights due diligence process. And the most important point here is starting off with understanding what your salient human rights impacts are. What are those most severe human rights impacts through your operations and your value chain? You know, how can you be harming people potentially? Which people, and how is this harm manifesting? And then a couple of other steps underneath. But then the third sort of get going step is thinking about grievance mechanisms. Do you have a vehicle in place through which people, whether that's your employees, whether it's your suppliers, workers, whether it's communities and so on, can flag to you that there has been a negative impact? Sometimes this is an ethics hotline. Sometimes it's an anonymous hotline of some sort. There can be a range of different mechanisms that businesses put in place. And what you want to think about is how effective it is, because sometimes businesses find that although initially they think everything is going well because they don't have terribly many complaints or terribly many grievances coming in, they often realize that actually what's sitting behind that is a lack of accessibility. And for various reasons, people don't trust these hotlines or these mechanisms and therefore aren't using them. So you just need to think about how effective they are, whether they're accessible, whether they're the outcomes and the way they're going to work is predictable, whether they're based on engagement with people who have been affected. Is the process transparent? Is it a source of learning for the company? And is it rights compatible? I also wanted to share, and you can take a look at that later on, some useful resources for you as you think about the guiding principles, the UN guiding principles, and how you get started. There are a few links here that I think might help you. And the third bullet is about a number of very interesting case studies that will at least be useful and interesting as you consider the connection between the guiding principles and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that's all I have time for, but I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has any questions, and I'll stop sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that enlightening explanation of the basic framework and also bringing it to life so much with your examples and also with the steps of how to take action. I think that particularly shows that action needs to be taken even beyond awareness, and also that all of these actions are actually key success factors for a human rights-based approach. I have two questions, or a two-in-one question, as we do not have any questions from the audience so far. Before that, I would like to also introduce you to the tools on our website, such as the Get Started tool and our risk assessments that we've done so far. That really gives a lot of good hints and measures for tourism business, how to prioritize, how to get started. We will post a link to our website, and just take your time to check out these tools that might also help you with everything that Mairead just said. So my question is, how should companies get started to particularly tackle the negative impacts on the people side, what you just mentioned as one of the key factors? And do you maybe have a good practice example? It doesn't have to be a tourism company that really already has a strategic roadmap on how to tackle these issues.
Yes, thank you. So what I didn't delve into is the process, but how do companies really get going? It's beginning with that assessment piece. It's first of all identifying the potential ways that your business could be negatively impacting on people across your different activities, and then going through a process of prioritization, because irrespective of the size of your organization, you cannot do everything at once, now and together in parallel. Every business has got to prioritize, and we see this with the largest companies, we see it with the smallest companies. Often it depends on your business, but a lot of the time you have a fairly good idea of what the potential impacts are that your business may be connected to. However, the prioritization process asks you to think about a couple of different things. On the one hand, consider the severity of the different impacts, and then consider the likelihood of the different impacts. So the severity focuses on how grave the impact could be, number one, how many people could be affected, number two, and then how easy or not it would be to put things right. We talk about that as being remediability. So consider those elements when you think about severity. And then likelihood, are there particular angles sort of baked into the context that you're operating in, baked into your business activities, and baked into your relationship with business partners that make the impact occurring more or less likely? So these are the elements that we would ask people to consider. Sounds really easy. I know it's not. I know it takes quite a bit of time to work through. But again, that first resource that I put on my slide will take you to information that helps you think more about this and start to do it yourself. So it is feasible to do it yourself, even if you're an SME. Did I answer all of that question?
Yeah, and do you have a good practice
example?
A
good practice. I beg your pardon.
No problem.
I thought there was a second piece missing. Yes, many companies, and again, I can share some examples with you afterwards that you can make available. We see a range, and of course, I'll talk about the big names, really. So the likes of Unilever, the likes of Marks and Spencers, the likes of Nestle, the likes of PepsiCo, Total, a very long list of companies have gone through this process, and they have come up with a very varied mix of salient human rights, so prioritized issues that they are going to focus on. Some come up with a list of 10, some come up with a list of 3. It really depends. But the point is, they've said, these are the ones who've gone through this process of prioritization. These are the ones we're going to tackle first, and we will communicate about them over time. So I'll share some of those examples with you afterwards.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mairead here from Shift in the UK.
Welcome.
And now we want to put all that theoretical framework into action. And therefore we have Nia with us from Kiri Travel. Thanks for being here, and thank you for showing us how Kiri has actually tackled the SDGs within your company, and help us to understand what companies can actually do to get started. Nia, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen with you. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Katharina. Yes, so I want to give you a few tips and ideas of what we can do as a tourism business to really implement the SDGs and to think about human rights and how they're all connected. But first, let me just give you a very quick introduction to Kiri Travel. So we are a destination management company. We were founded in 1993. And today we operate in 7 countries in Southeast Asia, which are Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam. We create and deliver personalized itineraries to operators worldwide. And in everything we do, we keep in mind the triple bottom line, which is people and people, planet, and profit. And actually, 2020 started really well for us. We became the very first DMC to be Travel Life certified in all destinations. Travel Life is a sustainability certification for tourism businesses. And so sustainability is really at the core of our business. It's really one of our core values and very important for us. Kiri Reach is our foundation, our non-profit foundation, and with that foundation we support different sustainable development projects all over our destinations. Unfortunately, we don't have the whole day, so I had to pick a few of the SDGs, and I'm going to go in detail how we worked with them. The first one, extremely important, I want to talk a little bit about child protection. And I understand that the situation might be different in Europe, but in Southeast Asia, unfortunately, children are still being exploited in the tourism industry. So this is something very important for us. And we've partnered years ago already, we've partnered with ChildSafe. ChildSafe is an NGO based in Cambodia. And they really helped us to develop our very detailed child protection policy. So, for example, we do not promote any visits to schools, orphanages, children's centers, hospitals, and so on. So we want to avoid any interaction between children under the age of 12 and Western tourists. We also provide child-safe trainings for our staff, but especially to our guides and drivers, because these guys are on the ground, so they know what's going on, and they need to know how to react when they see a child in a potentially dangerous situation. So they've got the child-safe number saved on their phone so they can call someone to get help. And we go a step further, so we really want to engage our supply chain. So one thing we have is a sustainability contract with all our suppliers. So it's basically an addendum to our normal contract. And we ask them in that sustainability contract to comply with very basic social and environmental aspects. And one of these aspects is also child labor and child protection. And with our hotels, for example, we go a step further. We have a very detailed sustainability assessment. So it's a big document with lots of questions on social, cultural, and environmental management. And again, the issues of child labor and child protection trainings are mentioned in this assessment. We also promote ChildSafe actively to our partners so that they can become a member or become a supporter as well. Let's move to the next one. Gender equality. Extremely important for us because 75% of our workforce is female. And I could imagine that it's maybe similar in your own companies. Somehow I have the feeling that the tourism industry is quite female-led, which is great. And given that huge, strong workforce, it's pretty easy to actually start with promoting from within. So you can really, if there's a management position available in one of your departments, let's choose a woman for that position. And what we also want to focus on is internal capacity building, and we want to give our staff the opportunity to develop their skills further. So for example, there was one staff, she loved photography. She was a really good photographer. So, okay, we funded a photography course for her. And now she's taking pictures for our marketing department, which is great. We also had in our sales manager in Vietnam and our finance director in Myanmar, they wanted to follow courses at the university. So they wanted to develop their skills further. And again, we supported them first of all financially, but also by just providing time for them to really focus on their studies. And my favorite story here is the story of Miss Cherry. Miss Cherry is one of our English-speaking tour guides in Myanmar, and she's always had this passion for Spanish. She loved the language Spanish, and she really wanted to learn it. So again, we supported her by attending a course, and now she can provide tours for us in English, but also in Spanish, which is great. And when looking at the itineraries, we want to, really promote women empowerment. and we want to support women's organizations. So in all of our destinations, we have women organizations. So it could be, NGOs giving employment opportunities to women, giving training to women, life skill training, or health and safety training, or training on how to write a business plan. Quite often these organizations also have visitor centers, or have visitor center where we can buy products made by these women, for example. So we always include these visits to such centers or NGOs in our itineraries, so that our clients can learn about women empowerment and can get actively involved in supporting women in our destinations. The next one, I want to talk a little bit about clean water and waste management. So unfortunately, in our destinations, we're still lacking the access to clean water. So we cannot just open the tap and drink the water from the tap. We have to buy filtered water. And this is a problem. So a lot of times in rural communities, people go out into the forest, collect wood, and then boil the water. And in the cities, or also in the tourism industry, it's very common practice to hand out these small single-use plastic water bottles. So we've got two initiatives which I want to share. One is we suggest to travel agents, to our partners, or also to the travelers, to donate or fund big water filter systems. So it's like 20-30 liter water filters, which can be donated to specific families or communities, which is really great, because then our guests can go out into the community, can meet the family, and can make this donation of water filter. And then, of course, that family has access to clean water right away. We've also moved away from the single-use plastic bottles. You can imagine how much waste we created by handing out these plastic bottles to every tourist we deal with. So we found alternatives. We have stainless bottles now available, and we automatically assume that all our tourists are actually going to join this initiative. We're also a supporter of Refill My Bottle. Refill My Bottle is a global network of refill stations. So it could be a coffee shop, it could be a restaurant, it could be a hotel or a tourism site where locals and visitors can refill their water bottle, so that we can, in the end, reduce the use of single-use plastic bottles. Then I want to move on to SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. And I think this is very important, and I think this is where we can have a major impact as a tourism business. So when looking at our products, for example, we can really make sure that our products actively benefit the people and the planet. And this first thing is very easy. We can give preference to locally owned businesses. So if there's a locally owned hotel or excursion suppliers, we work with them instead of maybe big chains. So we know exactly that the economic benefits stay within that destination. And sometimes what is difficult for us is that tourists have these bucket lists of sites they want to visit, and we want to promote less developed destinations. We want to make sure that we can distribute the economic benefits equally within the country. And so we're actively trying to promote not just the highlights in each of the country. And we also collaborate with local communities, with local NGOs, to really make sure that we have a positive impact on the destination. So for example, if there's a vocational training restaurant, okay, we're going to have lunch there, because then we know, okay, we provide, or we support an NGO providing underprivileged youth the opportunity to good employment and a sustainable income. And what I'm also very proud of, we're working very closely with our tour guides, again, to develop products. And I want to tell the story of Mr. Noy and Mrs. Noy. So Mr. Noy is one of our tour guides in Laos. He's been working with Kiri for years, and we love him. He's brilliant. And he came up to us and said, hey, listen, my wife, she's a great chef. She has great passion for the Lao cuisine. So why not make a product out of it? Why not, we can invite our guests into their home. They can cook together. Ms. Noy can show the Lao cuisine, can teach our clients about the Lao cuisine, and they can cook together and then enjoy a meal together. This is great because we know right away where the money goes, specifically to that family. And first of all, it gives her the opportunity to share her passion and share her culture. And at the same time, we created an additional form of income for that family. The next one, climate action. Also extremely important. And again, 2020 started really well. We actually declared climate emergency. We became a signatory of the Tourism Declares Climate Emergency Initiative. If you haven't heard of them yet, I recommend you look them up online. It's a great initiative by tourism businesses. So we became a signatory, and with that declaration, we also developed a very detailed climate emergency plan with different action and activities internally, but also externally among our supply chain. And this climate emergency plan really helps us to tackle our impact, our environmental impact on the destinations we work in, and helps us to outline our actions on how to reduce our emissions. Since January 2021, so this year, we've been carbon neutral. So that means we actually calculated our internal emissions. So we looked at how much electricity and water are we using in each of the offices, how much waste are we producing, how does our staff come to the office, how many kilometers do they travel, and what kind of means of transport are they using. We also looked at staff flights. And then with that, we calculated our carbon emissions internally. And the next step was then to look at our itineraries and calculate the carbon emissions for those. So we looked at the accommodation, what kind of hotel are our guests staying at, what kind of excursions are they doing, how many kilometers are they traveling per day, and are there any regional flights included. And now we've calculated the average carbon fee for all of our itineraries, which we automatically include in all new travel proposals sent out. So we automatically include a carbon offset program. Agents do have the chance to opt out if they have their own carbon offset program in place, but generally it's been quite successful so far. So that's for climate action. Let's move on to the last one, actually, partnerships for the goals. And I think this is extremely important because I think generally in sustainability, we have to collaborate and we have to work together. We're not going to achieve anything if we are doing it by ourselves. And with that, I think I've realized that in our destination, I think it's very important to raise awareness and provide support. Yeah, instead of finger pointing or boycotting, we really want to work together to have an impact on the communities, on the destinations, but also on the local authorities or governments even. So we actively promote responsible suppliers, and we want to collaborate with our partners. We collaborate with our competitors to really find better solutions. I want to give two examples. IDSC in Indonesia is a network, and Impact in Vietnam. There are two networks of responsible DMCs, and we work together, we come together, we work on different kind of working group projects where we focus on different issues, but we also organize different events and workshops directly for our suppliers and for the tourism industry in the destination. So our goal is really to connect our suppliers with, let's say, NGOs or organizations or projects which can help them to become more responsible. And for us, it's really important to raise awareness and encourage collaborations. Okay, these were just a few of the SDGs I focused on, and I think we still have a bit of time to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Nia, for sharing this detailed insights and also all of these lively and very practical examples. I think it's pretty impressive to see how Kiri as a company, like how the evolution of the goal setting went within the company and how you came up with all of these out of the box ideas. And I hope that that you could take away some ideas on how to take action. As currently people are still hesitating a little bit with their questions, I would again start with two questions. So the first one is, how was the strategical process in order to prioritize the most important SDGs? And the second one is, we often have the feeling that especially medium and small sized companies actually do a lot regarding the SDGs, but they do not really communicate that to the customer. So how is Kiri doing that?
Okay, let's start with prioritizing. I think for us, what really helped was the Travel Life certification. So it's 260 criteria, and this is what we really used as a roadmap to become more responsible. And I think because if you think about sustainability or the SDGs, it's so complex, it's so broad and so big. So it's difficult to say, okay, where do I get started, right? So I do think that a certification scheme, for example, helps you to break down this massive complex issue of sustainability. So that really helped us. And generally, I think it's very important to start internally before you actually move on to your supply chain or onto your working with your customers. So we looked at really internally, we started measuring our resources, we looked at our HR policies and all of these internal documents to really make sure, okay, we as a company become responsible first. And then the second question about communicating with travelers, it's true. And I think the issue quite often is that, you know, we don't want to come across as the teacher and tell tourists how to do things and what to do and what's bad. So I think, yeah, it's a once in a lifetime experience for them. It's quite often a once in a lifetime journey they do when they come with us to Southeast Asia. So what we're trying to do, it's true, we're not necessarily always talking about sustainability, but we're automatically including responsible products or responsible accommodation providers into the itineraries without even asking. So our goal is to mainstream responsible tourism without necessarily having the clients to ask for it or us telling the clients. And then I think with a lot of the other projects or initiatives, I think actually tourists, you know, they want to do good. They want to have a positive impact on the destination they visit. And what I mentioned, the project with the water filters, right? So our clients can go to communities or families and donate these water filters, and they love it. The feedback has been incredible so far, and we realized people want to, you know, tourists want to meet the local people. They want to have respectful interactions, and they want to learn from the local people, and they want to, you know, engage on a respectful level with them. And we do share that, of course. If we have a product, you know, going to Miss Noy and cooking with Miss Noy, of course, our tourists, they will know. It's like, okay, great, you're actively supporting this family, and now they're able to, I don't know, send their kids further to school and stuff like that. So and they do enjoy these stories and these encounters.
Thank you very much. People are still hesitating. I know that must have been a lot, so maybe it's just going to take some time to tackle. All right, now we have one question. So I think that goes to you, Nia. What impact has the pandemic had on the demand of your customers? Has the demand for offers like yours increased or decreased?
Of course, decreased. I mean, we don't have any travelers arriving in any of our destinations. We do get requests, and we do get requests for maybe later this year or next year. So it's been very difficult. So yes, all of our borders are shut. No tourists can actually or it's very difficult to travel to one of our countries besides Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is open, but travelers are very hesitant, and unfortunately, yeah, it's a very difficult situation.
I mean, that counts for the whole industry, of course, we know that. But still, I think it's very good that we still take the time to also deal with these kind of issues. Maybe sometimes also have now the time to think about restructuring processes. And that's what we're also here for. So I can only encourage all of you, if you don't know the Roundtable yet, if you don't know all of our offers yet, check out our website, check out our tools. We will help you to get started. You can always contact us with any upcoming issues regarding human rights. We will be there for you. Just let me add one thing, because that was a question that was raised in advance. We did not talk about the so-called Supply Chain Act, the so-called Lieferkettengesetz, because it just is not a thematic focus, especially because of the internationality of today's event, but also because the federal cabinet has only passed the draft of the law so far. But we know that it is an issue within the industry and that people think a lot about it. So just use the time and use the evaluation format to also let us know if you're particularly interested in that thematic area, and then we will try to also put a focus on that. Mairead, maybe you can also turn on your camera for a second. There is nothing left for me than to really, really thank you for your time. I see Antje has raised a question.
Sorry, I was not able to raise my hand, so I have to ask directly. Thank you very much for the insights and for the two different perspectives you are having on the issue. I'm wondering, Nia, maybe you could explain a little bit. As far as I know, you were also kind of connected to the human rights impact assessment that was conducted in Thailand and Myanmar by the Roundtable, or at least attended sessions, if I understood correctly. So I would like, my question goes in the direction, how is your prioritization on the SDGs informed by local dialogues with civil society organization, your networks, your partners, and local population? So maybe you could explain a little bit how these two things fit together. Thank you.
Yeah. We were not involved in that assessment. We've been reading about it, and we've just recently we were involved in with a new form of assessment within Thailand. That's right. Where it's more about the informal sector. I mean, absolutely. We that's our product, basically. I mean, the destinations, the people in the destinations, the communities, the locally owned restaurants and tuk-tuk drivers, and all of these people are actually making what Khiri is. Without all of these people, we would not be a travel company, I would say. So we definitely are looking for the dialogue, and for that we specifically use our guides, because these are the guys on the ground, and they have great knowledge of the destinations, and they can really they have great fast networks they can work with. So yes, we do work with our guides, and we work with the communities we visit to really find out how we can support them, or how we can reduce our negative impacts if there are any, for sure. I hope this was answered your question.
All right, I'm so sorry for missing that question, but I hope that we now have everything covered. I also take a look at Yara, but I think everything is fine. All right, then now there is nothing left. Thank you so much, Mairead. Thank you so much, Nia, for taking the time, for being here. And thank all of you. I mean, the first step is made. It's always important to show interest in the issue, and let's get started together.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.